what I am in the headspace for is more brain rot. And by brain rot, I mean Cenk Uygur debating Briahna Joy Gray. Um, and we're gonna get some more should you vote blue no matter who discourse, and I can't wait to vote for both people to fight each other. Fight, fight, fight. Yep, yep. He went on Rising the other day, so we're gonna watch that. And I apologize in advance. I'm sure it's not going to be pleasant. Here we go. I only bring you the finest quality brain rot.
Founder of the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur, is out with a new...
Cenk Uygur? Oh, okay. Well, okay. This man has never seen any of the Young Turks. He didn't even bother to watch an episode to figure out how to say the name.
New book entitled Justice is Coming, How Progressives Are Going to Take Over the Country and America is Going to Love It.
Oh, Darkstar Mike, thank you for the $25 dono. That is incredibly generous of you. And honestly, like, you're why I can go to the doctor and, like, pay bills. Thank you so much. That is incredibly generous, and also moves the ticker a little bit here to 16 out of 50. Let's go, folks. All right, here we go.
But I don't know if I'm going to love it, but apparently America will.
The book argues two main ideas. One, that progressives are correct on substantively these kind of policy issues. And two, America is actually a very progressive country. Millions of us know that we are part of something larger and that a movement is already transforming Washington. Cenk is here with us now to discuss. Welcome.
Thank you, guys. Great to be here.
So this was part of the Bernie 2020 pitch, obviously, that there's a genuine populist movement that just needs to be tapped into in the United States. And there were many aspects of that campaign that seemed to validate that reality, the fact that he out-fundraised rather everybody else in the race, despite not taking any corporate PAC money or billionaire dollars. But at the end of the day, seemed unable to squeak one out, both in 2016 and 2020. So what do you say to folks who push back against the idea that progressivism is actually popular, given that we have not had very much success in the electoral realm?
Yeah. So a decent amount of the book is actually dedicated to that. First, chapter 1 explains that it's indisputable that the country is progressive on almost every issue. I say almost just because maybe I couldn't find one, but every issue I looked at, the country's about 2/3 progressive. And so that might be shocking to people who are used to mainstream media, because why don't we win? Because of mainstream media. Mainstream media creates a mythology that this is a center-right country, a conservative
Hey, trans
country.
girl Jade, where you been?
It creates a mythology that corruption is perfectly normal, that taking corporate bribes is normal. It's not normal. It's what most corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans do. It has greatly corrupted our system, and most importantly, it has corrupted our media. The reason why I say it's most important is because that is where the voters get their information. If they get the wrong information, there's no way in the world they can make the right decision. And corporate media, mainstream media, has been lying to them for decade after decade after decade. Once we get past that monster, then progressives will easily win, because the entire country, at least on economic issues, for sure is progressive.
Yeah, I think, look, I think I have to admit, as someone who doesn't agree with a lot of what progressives have to offer in economics, although I'm sure we can find areas of agreement. Sure, the economic agenda being offered by the left is, I read polls too, regardless of what I think about it, is certainly more popular than what I would describe as the kind of elite social and cultural values that are not necessarily attached to policies, but are very hugely alienating to so many normal Americans, the issues beloved by the elites. So how do progressives get through then, or stop allowing college professors to speak on their behalf, or
again, I do have to say, like, seeing Cenk go down this road where he's like, basically saying, oh, we need to throw, like, the more optically inconvenient people under the bus, like, normal trans people are fine, but, like, those non-binary trans people, we need to throw them under the bus. Like, it just, which is what it's, if that's not what he's saying, it's what it seems like to me as somebody who's watched kind of this path he's gone down. Like, we watched that Valuetainment interview not that long ago, and having him be like, oh, we need mainstream progressives versus like leftist progressives, because the mainstream are in favor of like sane things and focus on economic policy, but the extremists are out there, making an issue about trans people in sports, and that we can't have that because that just makes us look silly. Like, why honestly, backing down on this just makes you look weak.
Woke employees at institutions that want to cancel everyone, that sort of thing that gets associated with progressivism and gives the whole project a bad name.
And also, like, Robbie Sove is like a deeply, deeply conservative man. Like, the fact that he's like finding common ground here should be greatly distressing, I think, to someone in Cenk's position who fancies themselves, progressive. And like, the reality is, you're not a progressive if you're aligning yourself alongside these conservative values.
Yeah, so there's a couple of issues there, Robbie. Number one, corporate media, both, and when I say corporate media, that has the umbrella of what we consider mainstream media, like CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, NPR, etc., and right-wing media. They're both under corporate media. And so NPR might seem like an odd fit there, but it has the same exact groupthink as the rest of them do. And corporate media loves it when we engage in the culture wars. Go extreme left, go extreme right, tear each other to pieces, and don't look up, because the real people in power are above you.
But like, just as a like an aside, it's so weird that he acts like nothing of value is gained by these culture wars when like the left has been winning the culture war. Like, trans people like are under attack right now because we currently enjoy more rights and protections in most places in the United States than we ever have before. And like, we are winning. It's just sucking in the intermediate period between now and when we fully win. And like, the fact that he sees that and he's like, oh, well, we should fall back on these cultural issues. Like, it's silly to me.
It's not the immigrant that came in without a dollar in his pocket, just crossed the border. He has no power at all. It isn't the LGBTQ person competing in sports in high school. That's not the issue in America, but it works brilliantly in tearing us apart. Where
does it though? Because like, people are generally coming over on the issue of trans people in sports. Generally speaking, it's true. We're moving people to the left. That's what progressive media is for. And like, not only that, like, every story that comes out about trans people in sports makes conservatives look terrible. Because they're out there advocating for like genital inspections for children. They're out there creating crazy people in the stands who go to like their granddaughter's track meet, and then they see like a girl who's just kind of built a bit heavier, and then they say, "Oh, that's actually a transgender," and then they like start a witch hunt against like a student in some random ass middle school. Like, that story doesn't make conservatives look good. Are you kidding me? It makes them look terrible. Nobody liked that.
But the second part of it is a little bit true, Robbie, which is that some portions of the left have totally fallen into that trap, in my opinion, and are engaging in not only those culture wars, but only those culture wars. Brother, I need you to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, so we can fight back against the right wing on those.
I mean, I guess that's true. Like, if you're just interested in the culture war, like, you also should be caring about, economic justice as well. But generally speaking, I don't think there are people who are just embroiled in the culture war. Like, if you're online arguing with transphobes, generally speaking, you're also going to be like, pretty economically progressive as well. Like, it's just weird. It's weird. He's being weird.
Social issues, and at the Young Turks, we aggressively do that. But at the same time, I need you to focus on what unites us economically. Otherwise, we'll never be able to beat the people up top.
I wanted you to dig into that a little bit more. Recently, I'm sure you're aware, there was
Oh my
some
God.
controversy among the left because podcast host and comedian Jimmy Dore recently made a sort of argument like this to Cornel West, arguing that he was overemphasizing resistance to white supremacy, at least in his rhetoric, if not in his campaign, and he was pushing him to focus more exclusively on economic issues. How do you see that trade-off, and do you think that there needs to be a kind of hierarchy of things like economics over racial or social issues, or in the case of the argument that Jimmy Dore was making, a focus on COVID and being anti-mandate and anti-moratorium over something like the fight against white supremacy?
Yeah. So this gets super nuanced. So let me walk through all of it as quickly as I can. First, the number one problem with Jimmy Dore's approach is he goes and mainly agrees with the right wing on social issues, and then
Yeah, Briahna Joy Gray out of the corner with the steel chair. No, I like it. She's here to debate Cenk Uygur on Jimmy Dore. It's man, the dumb left is a lost cause.
says, "Oh, like I'm not going to agree that the vaccine doesn't work. Sorry, I'm not going to agree to things that aren't true. I'm not going to agree that the election was stolen." I'm not saying that Jimmy's saying that. I have lost track of what the crazy ramblings in his head or what he says out loud. But he keeps trying to bring the left over to the right wing. That's not how you do it. You say, look, it's not that you guys are moving your position or that we're moving our position. It's just that we're finding common ground in the places where we agree. Both of us can take yes for an answer, but you should not sheep herd your audience to the right wing. That is not at all productive. Now, in terms of hierarchies, like I said earlier, you don't need a hierarchy. Why do we have to debate and vote on, is this social issue more important or is this economic issue more important? It's not that hard to do both. It's not. So when they pass...
Well, Jimmy's crazy, which is why, I don't know, pretty cringe to defend him.
laws against trans people, gay people, etc. in these states, when they pass a law saying we shouldn't teach real African-American history in Florida, you could fight back against that. And at the same time, hey, Republicans, you know that 3/4 of you agree with us on paid family leave. We'll take yes for an answer. Come on, let's go do paid family leave together. Let's make sure that moms and dads have 12 weeks off after they deliver a baby. And so there's no reason in the world you can't do both. And once you get into hierarchies and prioritizing, that starts internal wars. Oh, you think class is more important than race? Oh, you think race is more important than class? And then all you're doing is fighting when you cannot win on economic issues unless you unite against the establishment.
Which is why, by the way, you need to be a rainbow coalition, if you will, that is able to cater and meet the needs of all the component parts, you know, like supporting basic civil rights for trans and gay people. That's a necessary component of building these coalitions that he's talking about.
They're the ones that are actually in charge.
Speaking of sheep herding, there are some who are over the idea of working within the Democratic Party, who see the obstacles to actually winning as insurmountable after Bernie Sanders, who was better positioned than...
Bro, just be honest and say this is your position. Just be honest. You don't have to be like, some people think this. Many people are saying my exact position.
Probably any candidate the left is going to have in generations was thwarted the way he was thwarted by the Democratic Party, and now people are seeing the way the DNC is ostensibly rigging the election in various ways, not having any debates, saying that there will be no primary, changing the order of the primary contests, et cetera, in a way that makes it very difficult for insurgent candidates like Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr. to advance in the polls. As a consequence of all of that, many people on the left are saying, I'm over participating in the Democratic Party entirely, are looking to third-party campaigns like Dr. Cornel West's campaign, and see those who
many people are saying
want folks to participate in any kind of electoral contest within the Democratic Party as doing exactly that, as sheep herding, especially when some of the people who might encourage one to vote for a Democrat ultimately in 2020 or 2016 and probably in 2024, are going to say at the end of the day, you should vote to defeat Trump. And
Code mode. Briahna Joy Gray is debating Cenk Uygur on the merits of Jimmy Dore, and also now trying to make the case that, you know, people dissatisfied with the two-party duopoly should vote for Cornel West, because she believes that's going to have an effect on the actual political reality of the United States, which is insane and delusional thinking.
vote for the Democrat, even if they don't reflect the progressive values that you've said, and I agree, are so popular. What do you make of that argument?
So I think that rationality dictates that you have to understand the distinction between primaries and general elections. So the establishment says you shouldn't have primaries, especially on the Democratic side. You should just bow your head. Whoever's in charge, they get to dictate who should be the leader. And you progressives are rascals. You're so unruly. You must obey, right? If you listen to that, you're nuts. That is them totally brainwashing you. There should be a massive primary against Joe Biden. Poll out today, 72%.
I mean, sure, there should be, but part of the problem is there's not. And you know why there's not. There's not because, like, you know, the ability to defeat an incumbent is pretty rare and difficult to come by in politics. And the general consensus of the political calculations is that his incumbent status will buoy his numbers enough to be able to defeat Donald Trump. And, like, honestly, they might not be wrong on that one. But, like, there is no other primary challenger right now who is capable of beating him. Like, Marianne Williamson is polling okay, but, like, she's not going to unseat Biden right now. Like, just point blank.
Of Americans think that he is not mentally capable of running again, that he's too old. 72%. And the lunatics in the Democratic Party and the lunatics in Washington go, yeah, we should run a guy that 72% of the country doesn't think could be president against Donald Trump. They say this is the most important election of our lifetimes, but let's run an addled, wounded antelope against this demagogue fascist. How does that make sense? That doesn't make any sense at all. There's just their lust and their greed for power is unbearable. So that's the primaries. And in the primaries, Marianne is, at this point, clearly the best candidate. It's not even close, okay? But as you see there's one thing I wanted to quickly correct, because in my opinion, I don't think the Democratic Party has much power at all. So they set the debates, they set this, they set that. I understand that, but they don't rig votes. They just set all the context. And I hate the rules that they set, and I think they're deeply corrupt. But that's not the number one problem. The number one problem is media. If Marianne Williamson got the same amount of respect and coverage in the media as Joe Biden did, Donald Trump, Vivek Ramaswamy gets, then Marianne would be in a real contest with Joe Biden. But the media freezes her out, shames anyone who supports, oh, she's not serious. Like, you morons are serious? You've ruined this country. But yes, when you get to a general election and somebody's sitting at 3% and the other two guys are sitting at 40%, well, brothers and sisters, I love you, but there is a reality that you are, in fact, taking a vote that would be against Donald Trump, and you're putting it in a category that is not going to win, and you all know that. I'm not saying today. I'm saying if you get to election day, and the polling still shows that, and don't give me this crap about, I don't believe in polling, I think 3% could magically turn into 51%. But if on that day, your candidate's definitely not going to win, why would you help Trump? Why? Why would you help him?
Well,
it just makes no rational sense to me.
Let me ask you this, Cenk.
My body.
Why would the Democratic Party ever stop? You don't want to characterize it as rigging. I will. Rigging the primary, disallowing a primary. Why would the media ever stop putting its finger on the scale the way that it does? If voters ultimately...
Because the media would have to react to a reality of getting ranked choice voting passed on numerous state levels, enough state levels to make a multi-party system far more feasible. The media would, like, just won't like, is it just gonna not cover something like that? Like, it changes our entire political paradigm. Like, man.
Validate that behavior by continuing to vote blue no matter who, no matter how bad the Democratic Party gets, and no matter how corrupt the DNC is. When does it stop?
Yeah, it stops when we win the goddamn primary. And by the way,
Well, yeah, you consolidate until you break the duopoly, consolidate power within the party, win primaries, become involved, work behind the scenes to organize in a more leftist way. Like, you can exert power here, but like, it's not ideal. So you know what? Let's also at the same time fight on state levels to get ranked choice voting passed. It's not a complicated subject, from my perspective, anyway.
that's impossible. No, it's not. Bernie came this close in 2016, and he came this close in 2020. He won the first 3 states. And who stopped him? Was it the Democratic Party that stopped him? No, it was corporate media that then heaped tons of negative coverage on Bernie. Can we get past corporate media? Of course we can. I know it's super hard, and that's their wall that's meant to keep us out, right? But look at us. You're doing it on Rising. We're doing it on Young Turks, and all of us are getting
honestly, like, this is frustrating because it's like somebody who's just realizing that sometimes video games aren't fair to players. You know, like, yeah, sometimes things aren't fair in life, actually, and we might have to do something about that. Like, we might have to, you know, get involved and deal with how unfair it is and then change it over a period of time.
Passive by having these conversations and having it reach the American people. Can a progressive win a primary? Absolutely. But we need to have progressives who try and who bring us together on economic issues like Bernie did in 2016. And then I guarantee you victory. That's also what the book is about. I guarantee you victory in 2028.
Cenk, you don't think that the Democratic Party played a role in Obama calling the leading candidates, including Pete Buttigieg, who at that point had done better than Joe Biden?
Sure, but they had to call out Obama to unite every single candidate in the primary. Like, yeah, they had to put weight on the scale, but like, that's so much weight that A, we came close enough to actually do that, should reveal that they don't have as much power as they might wish they did, and B, we can make things better. Like, Bernie Sanders is like almost single-handedly responsible for a large degree of current progressive policies, and he didn't win. You know, you can still do things.
And asked him to drop out after the South Carolina win. You don't think that that's evidence that the Democratic Party is willing to do whatever it takes to consolidate around a non-progressive candidate?
Briahna, I don't disagree with you 1%. That's not what I'm saying. I know Obama did that. I know that the so-called moderate Democrats, who are actually corporate Democrats, coalesced. By the way, Elizabeth Warren has done many great things.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Gamer G knows. Like, we both do organizing. No campaign chases non-voters. And no campaign is generally chasing, like, third-party voters either. They're chasing proven or past voters for Democrats, you know, who haven't been particularly active.
Things in her career, you cannot wipe that away. But her not coalescing with Bernie, both in 2016 and critically in 2020, cannot be forgiven. It was just, when they coalesce, we have to coalesce. Anyways, but Briahna, what I'm saying is that was not the critical factor. Obama can get all of the corrupt Democrats together and all the corporatists together, and they can go, whoa. But if the media doesn't then smear Bernie and doesn't elevate Biden, it doesn't work. It's the media that's the critical part. The Democrats try to rig elections, but if the media didn't play along, that plot would not have worked at all. Bernie would have won the 4th primary state, and it would have been over. We were so close. My problem with progressives in Congress is we got near the goal line, and now they're going backwards. And they're going, oh, corporate Democrats, we bow our heads, we all endorse Joe Biden. Are you nuts?
Okay, they're moving backwards based on their support of Joe Biden, for which they have gotten concessions. Like, again, this is so bizarre to me. Like this pushback, like, oh, they're endorsing Biden. Well, yeah, they're endorsing Biden because there's no viable challenger to Biden. Yeah.
Nuts. What are you endorsing Joe Biden for? He's a terrible candidate. He's a weak candidate. He's going to lose. He's not very progressive. And you endorse him without getting anything in return? Don't you know even elementary politics? Use your leverage, for Christ's sake. Guys, you've got to trust me on the numbers. We're going to win these primaries. And mainstream media gets weaker by the day, and we get stronger by the day. Those primaries are ours. It's just like even today, why don't we have a more forceful primary against Biden? Because while the media whines and complains about Biden, the minute that anybody steps in the race, they go, "How dare you put your head to the leader?" If you're a Democrat and you're a progressive, are you nuts listening to corporate media? No, do not ever listen to corporate media. Their job is to lull you back into sleep and make sure that you love the status quo and that you obey corporate rule. Do not do that. Go and fight in the primaries. It is not at all too late. Look, if these are the only choices we have, voting for Marianne Williamson in the primary is the biggest no-brainer a progressive should ever have. There's no reason in the world to vote for Biden. She's both a stronger candidate and a more correct candidate.
Cenk, let me ask you this before we go, and I'm sure you get into some of this in your book. You know, I think you're so correct to rail against.
I'm sure you get into this in some of your book, which I haven't bothered to look at. I'm sorry.
The mainstream media, the corporate media, and the choices that they make. And, you know, obviously we're part of a corporation, so I guess I can't say we're not corporate media, but we try to platform and celebrate alternative narratives like your own. But let me ask you this, because you went after Jimmy Dore.
Yeah, like the part of the problem is, like, we need somebody who's willing to run, first of all, within the Democratic Party. And Marianne Williamson isn't going to win. So, like, who is someone who is both a viable candidate against Trump and also, like, your pick? Because otherwise, all I'm hearing is, like, oh, Biden's not good enough. Fuck Biden. And, like, it's true. Biden's not good enough. But who are you proposing as an alternative?
A little bit a minute ago. I've noticed that in a lot of these independent and alternative media spaces, voices we've featured on the show before, people who got big by having very pro-Bernie Sanders audiences and messages, have had, if not a right-wing drift, I'm not sure that's in the direction of progressivism, or it's not in the direction of normal Bidenism either. It's in a direction, I think, of being more open to the right. People whose audiences, I think, have that perspective, like Glenn Greenwald's audience, Russell Brand's audience. We're going to be talking about Russell Brand later today for anyone watching this right now. That kind of thing. How does that square with your thesis on the inevitable takeover of progressivism?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. Number one,
without the disastrous COVID response and historic anti-racist, anti-fascist protest, is Biden going to have enough voter turnout and momentum to win this time around? Trump only needs to get like 200,000 votes across 6 states to win, even if he loses by multiple millions of votes. I mean, maybe. We'll have to see, right? But, like, it's going to be closer this time, and that's not comforting. Though a lot of stuff legally can happen to Trump between now and then, so we'll have to see. You know, he might not be able to campaign so good if he's in jail.
People are getting so frustrated with the Democratic Party because they almost never deliver, that they're looking for alternatives. I mean, look, as a meta issue, that's why Trump won in 2016 in the first place. The country is so deeply anti-establishment, except no one on TV will ever tell you that, because they are the establishment. They're not going to come on TV and go, hey, by the way, country, I'm going to end the gaslighting here. It turns out you guys all hate us. They're not going to say that, okay? So that is the absolute reality here. So, but when you get into the Jimmys of the world, there's audience capture and there's financial interests, and then some have just lost their minds, in my opinion. Okay, and so, for example, Jimmy does a video that's pro-vaccine. It doesn't get a lot of views. He does one that's vaccine skeptical. It gets a lot of views. Guess what he does next? 20 more videos that are vaccine skeptical. That's called audience capture, and you partly do it for the ego and you partly do it for the money, and it takes strength not to go in that direction. And the right wing is going and
Can we pause? That was a lot. Also, the other chatter. Good night, Darkstar Mike. Get good sleep. And again, thank you very much for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. Briahna Joy Gray is such a non-serious actor. Oh yeah, no. Like again, if you're out there telling people to vote like not against fascism, I consider you a deeply unserious person, you know?
Capturing these hosts one by one, and everybody has their different things. Look, I don't know Russell Brand and Glenn Greenwald's situation, but I do know that sometimes if some people have done terrible things, where are you going to go? You're not going to go to the left where they're going to out you and they're not going to support you. You're going to go to the right where they circle the wagons and they say you can do anything you want as long as you agree with us.
Cenk, I have to offer some, I think, pushback there. One on two fronts. One, I do think that you're accurately describing a psychological phenomenon where if people are...
Why are they debating Jimmy Dore? Because Briahna Joy Gray wanted to defend Jimmy Dore and attack Cenk for his attacks against Jimmy Dore. You know, the scoundrel.
Getting a lot of criticism and pushback, some of which they perceive to be bad faith.
Again, because they're both in the force the vote crowd. You know, that runs thicker than blood. Okay.
There is an inclination to spend more time with people who have been nicer. I'm not saying that's a moral choice, but it is an obvious psychological outcome. And does that mean that people within the left community should perhaps extend more grace to each other so that that doesn't actually happen? And the second, I would just want to ask you about, you know, similar accusations, I feel I would be remiss not to bring up, that have been made about your network, Young Turks, about the $20 million of Katzenberg money that some people have argued changed the direction of TYT's coverage in a more liberal and less left direction.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll take it one at a time. Should people show each other more grace on the left? Absolutely. At the same time, you notice a phenomenon, it's okay to point it out. So it's okay for us to point out what Jimmy does with his videos is super obvious. It's one thing to criticize the Democratic Party. As you can tell from this interview, I do it very regularly and very forcefully. It's another thing to say the Republicans are okay. The Republicans are not okay. The Republicans are a disaster. The Republicans are much worse than the Democrats. Okay, now on to the second issue. Yeah, so then people go and look around and they go, okay, well, oh, the Young Turks got 20 million investment. Okay, now here's the things people don't know. People say Katzenberg was involved, no question. The amount he has is near microscopic. And by the way, we pay the money back. So I be honest, that's breaking news. We've never told anyone that, but we did. So
Yeah. I don't actually fault Cenk for taking a loan to expand his business. That's fine. Or you know, investment to expand the business. I honestly don't mind that at all. It's for some reason some leftists seem to act like this is some kind of gotcha, but it's not. He's running a business. Like that's how running a business works.
So that has no influence on us. But most importantly, Briahna, people just make up that we went towards the right way or went towards the moderate Democrats. I mean, they call me.
Well, yeah, moving more conservative, you know, doesn't mean you are a conservative. It just means you moved along the political spectrum. Like that's not actually that controversial.
Like those the lunatic fringe that follow Jimmy say we're establishment shills. They haven't watched
It's true, LB. You can't use emotes. Oh no.
1 minute of the show. I mean, look at what the things I said to you before.
Sure,
No.
whatever. I don't want Jack to think we don't want to hear her sing. Boo woo, boo woo woo woo.
Thank you for the 5 gifted subs, Salmon Moose. That is incredibly generous, and it helps me to not die, and makes me feel good that you at least want me to feel good, and I appreciate that. I know I don't have the best singing voice, but I do enjoy singing sometimes. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
For this question, right? Does it look like a 1% pro-establishment? But they will see that and go, aha, nail it, he's for Hillary Clinton. Well, look, I can't help you if you're not dealing with facts and logic. You
Hey,
can't
Nova
show
Celeste.
anything where we're in favor of Hillary Clinton.
Well,
No
specifically,
one
well,
thank
fights
you,
harder in
Salmon
the
Moose.
primaries against corporate Democrats
Thank you,
than
Bretta.
TYT.
Okay, I wasn't fishing for compliments on my voice, but I'll certainly take them. Thank you so much.
Does, Young Turks does, and I do. I formed the Justice Democrats to fight against corporate Democrats, and we defeated them. There's nothing more practical and more real than what I did there in that instance.
I mean, Cenk, I think specifically one of the moments that I remember of TYT being characterized as no longer capturing the spirit of the Justice Democrats or what the Justice Democrats were supposed to do was the moment around Force the Vote, where there was a push for the elected squad
Oh, and you
members
caught
to take an
LB. Hell
adversarial
yeah.
relationship to the Democratic Party. And
I better see all kinds of crayons in chat.
Nancy Pelosi specifically, to withhold their votes for them the same way that we've now seen the Freedom Caucus model with withholding their votes for Kevin McCarthy at the beginning of this year, really testing the theory of how that would work and getting in return a number of concessions that I think we can all acknowledge would be amazing for the left to have achieved. And at that time, despite there being a poll that TYT put out of its audience, where a majority of the TYT audience seemed to support Force the Vote, the newscasters, the personalities on the show, were very much against it. And as I'm sure you can remember, that caused a significant rift down the left that persists in many ways. What do you say to that? I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, it's crazy. But thank you for bringing it up, because I'm happy to address it and try to clarify it the best I can. Guys, do I look like I don't want to force votes? Of course I do, right? And I tell every...
I can't believe it. Like, Briahna Joy Gray can't go one conversation with a leftist without bringing up Force the Vote, a failed campaign from years ago now. I think like 3 or 4 now at this point. She can't not bring it up. She's so salty that AOC didn't show up to like the weird like summit that they had planned, her and Jimmy Dore. She can't not bring it up. It's crazy, bro.
Congressperson that's going into Congress for the first time, if they'll listen to me, I tell them, you have to create what the civil rights movement called good trouble. Now, that doesn't mean you go in wildly and flailing around doing impractical things, but it means you come up with a coordinated strategy, you then create good trouble, and then you put a spotlight on an issue where you are on the winning end of it, popularity-wise. So, for example, one of the things we did with Justice Democrats is as soon as AOC won, we did a sit-in Nancy Pelosi's office. That put Green New Deal on the map. That put Sunrise Movement on the map. And in a lot of ways, it reinforced Justice Democrats being on the map. I want you to take those kind of actions. But you have to actually use your mind and independent judgment as to which action to take. So Force the Vote, Jimmy comes to me. Back then, we're still friends and allies. And I go, oh, look, it sounds like a pretty good idea. Okay, I definitely want to do something where we're forcing action, right? So what's your plan, Jimmy? He's like, well, we're going to force the vote, and we're going to, get Medicare for all. I'm like, brother, I want Medicare for all, but you have to take steps. You have to take steps. If you go straight to Medicare for all, you have a 0% chance of it passing, and you're going to waste the power and the leverage. And who are you going to get as speaker?
Cenk, I wasn't trying to relitigate this by bringing it up apropos of nothing. I wasn't... Why are you acting like this, Cenk? I don't understand.
For the House. And he's like, I don't know. That's your strategy? No, I'm not going to agree with a moron who has no strategy, no plan, not at all practical. We could have forced the vote on $15 minimum wage, and we could have won that vote. But instead, the force the vote, we're like, yeah, well, you didn't do what I wanted. Okay, then I'm out. I'm not going to help you guys actually get the bills that we all want. Oh, come on, man, grow up.
Now, so Cenk, I would point out that Kevin McCarthy is still Speaker of the House. The issue was not whether or not Nancy Pelosi would necessarily become Speaker. The left, people
Briahna,
like yourselves. Wait a minute.
Who is going to replace Nancy Pelosi? Did you guys have a candidate? Who?
Cenk, if I could.
Which is my response to Cenk when he talks about like the squad being traitors or something. Like who then? Who?
The right-wing caucus got a number of meaningful concessions. Regardless
But that's
of,
not what
wait a
we were
minute,
going for,
excuse me,
Briahna. That's
excuse
exactly
me.
the problem. If they said, let's go
Excuse
for
me.
meaningful concessions, I would have been in. They said, we're going to get Medicare for all.
Cenk,
Sure
with all
we
due
are.
respect, your
Fantasy land.
characterization of what happened, I think, is reflective of the lack of grace and communication that was happening among the left at the time. And I think if people have
Again, she brings this up, I believe, deliberately, so she can position herself as a holier-than-thou leftist. And it's the same thing Jimmy Dore does. Jimmy Dore is just a bit more abrasive about it, you know? Ashley, get good sleep. Thank you for being here, and thank you for inventing the internet, or helping to invent the internet, rather. I appreciate it, genuinely and sincerely. The problem with leftists in media is they have zero idea how government functions. The fact they poo-pooed the squad getting important committee assignments when that was literally how legislation passes made me so mad. Yeah, 100% Gamer G. Like, again, it's born out of, like, this almost black-pilled political leftism, which we talked about in the Jimmy Dore video, is kind of a gateway to Nazbolism, this tanky ideology that circles around the drain to just kind of like, general fascism or authoritarian loving, inclinations. And, like, it comes from, like, this hopelessness. And I think a lot of that hopelessness is actually born out of the belief that people can't do anything about it, that that they have no power that they can exercise. And I think part of that is also born of the fact that there's a lot of ignorance about how legislation actually works. Like, most people's understanding of, like, passing legislation begins and ends with that Schoolhouse Rock, like, musical number. Okay? Like, that's about the extent of it. So I think people are not sure about the process. They're kept in the dark about the amount of power they have. And then they get their hopes up over a candidate. They get their hearts dashed, and they don't know where to point the blame. So they listen to people like Briahna Joy Gray or Jimmy Dore, and they essentially kind of get lulled into this conspiracism and also this position of being politically ineffectual. And that's just kind of where we're at, right? And that ineffectualism, like, eventually invades their ideology. The Russell Brand school of thought, don't vote. Exactly. Don't vote, or vote third party for someone who is not going to win. Goddamn.
Had been less motivated by their personal animosities against each other. It seemed that Jimmy Dore, you've expressed some animosity toward him several times during our short conversation here. I do think if those personal animosities weren't at play, maybe we could have been in a world where you were listening to myself, Crystal Ball, Kyle Kalinske.
It's so interesting. Yeah, maybe, if things had been different, you would be listening to me and not trying to argue against my bad ideas.
Other figures on the Cornel West, Chris Hedges, who were also advocating for this and who were being very clear that there were any number of demands. I wrote an article in Current Affairs that set all of this out contemporaneously, so you can go.
Yeah, you can go back and read that, but it doesn't change the fact that it was a bad idea, conceptually and in execution.
Back and look that it wasn't this idea that we were going to hold the vote and magically get Medicare for all.
Ooh,
to the
Elite
extent that
Dangerous
was
is
your
fun.
presumption
Briahna,
and your
you know it
belief.
was.
I do think that is a
Name one
real
other thing.
problem in
Name one other
communication on the
concession
left.
that you guys wanted at the time. Name one other concession at the time. Don't make it up now. At the time, name one other thing you guys
I invite
wanted.
you and the rest of the audience to go look at an article I wrote in Current Affairs magazine in November of 2020, in which I consulted with David Sirota and included a list of subsequent ancillary demands that he had written up in his own publication, and I linked to them and say that these are also important. The important thing is,
interesting that she seems to be dancing around the what she and the other Force the Vote people had been advocating for, because she is like, well, David Sirota brought up someone. David Sirota brought up a few, and I mentioned them, and then I gave a link to them. Like, that's, but interesting that right now She can't name one single goddamn other consolation or concession, rather. It's really not fair that authorities like politicians shame Americans for not being able to pass a citizenship test because we're somehow supposed to know everything about civics. When public schools keep getting cut and most people just only bother going to school just to graduate and get it all over with. 100% Enzo.
That we need to demand something in exchange for our votes. But we don't need to rehash that. Go ahead. I'll give you the last.
No, I need to say one last thing,
respond.
Briahna. I need to say one last thing. You guys make it sound like we're the ones who have animus. No, be clear about how this thing started. As I told you in the beginning, I said, well, that's interesting. Let's have a conversation about strategy. And the minute I said, let's have a conversation about strategy, Jimmy said that we were taking money from the CIA and Nancy Pelosi. You just mentioned David Sirota. He also attacked David Sirota. He also attacked Amy Goodman from Democracy Now! and insinuated she...
Which is basically like the leftist equivalent of mocking, you know, I don't know, Dolly Parton. You know, Dolly Parton is just a good egg. Okay, no one should ever say a bad word about her. Okay, and Amy Goodman is just like the ultimate good egg in like leftist journalism. You know.
She was working with the CIA. So then I thought, well, no, I'm not going to work with a lunatic who thinks that Amy Goodman might be working with the CIA. And second of all, I didn't start the fight. This lunatic comes in frothing at the mouth. I'm being funded by CIA and Nancy Pelosi. How are you supposed to have a rational conversation with an absolute lunatic like that? And then you guys think we started it? Are you insane?
I didn't say you started it. I don't care about the personalities. Cenk, you're talking about personalities.
I don't care about the personalities, which is why I brought up Jimmy Dore to defend him in this conversation. It's why I brought up this entire line of dialogue.
I'm talking about issues. All I know is that David Sirota supported Force the Vote. I had him on my podcast talking about it many times. Yes, he did. And he continues to be an advocate that I value and respect a great deal. And he is able, as a mature person, to tease away his personal feelings about human beings that he might share an idea with.
I just wanna say, like, if you listen to the way Briahna Joy Gray talks, like, she talks about politics in the same way people in the South say "bless your heart." You know, like, if you listen to what she's saying here right now, she's basically, you know, I mean, just listen to this last sentence, right?
To tease away his person, and he is able, as a mature person, to tease away his personal feelings about human beings that he might.
He's able, as a mature person, you know, the implication there being that, oh, Cenk, you're being immature because you're not acting like David Sirota. Like, it is, you know, gaslighting, condescension, and insulting all at once. It's actually pretty impressive, you know?
Share an idea with or a strategy with, and the underlying strategy. And I really do hope that we see more of that on the left and less of a focus on who it is that's delivering a certain kind of a message, especially if you're right, Cenk, and it's going to require a united and powerful independent media force in order to actually ever get a progressive into office. Thank you.
Well, also ranked choice voting, and also ranked choice voting to end the two-party duopoly, and then, you know, you have to have a cohesive media and also organizing ecosystem to be able to get progressives into office. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today and talking through some of these tough issues.
No problem. And you guys are funded by the CIA. But I'm sure you won't take offense at that. So just be cool. Be cool. Let's agree on policies. But you're obviously, Briahna bought her house, has a Mercedes and a Rolls Royce, all funded by Hillary Clinton and the CIA. But it's cool. It's cool. Let's stay friends.
About the only thing Briahna has convinced me of on this show is that there is, in fact, more dysfunction on the left than on the right. And today is a good example of that. Thank you very much.
God, I hate Robbie. I hate him so much. What the actual fuck? Dude. I like, Cenk is just angry and taking one last, like, sucker punch at the end. But, like, for real though, like, Briahna Joy Gray makes a lot of money with the positions she holds and the platform she built with a guy named Virgil Texas. He apparently was accused of some inappropriate sexual behavior with minors, and just disappeared shortly after founding Bad Faith Podcast, which Briahna Joy Gray still hosts. And oddly, he's still on all the branding and still listed as a co-creator of the podcast. And just kind of weird that hasn't really been brought up very much. And she makes like $15,000 a month off of that podcast. Like an absurd amount of money. Like, she's like laughing here at the end, like, ah ha 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 ha. But like, no, her positions have made her a very wealthy individual, Hey, Adrian Vixen. Get on her show and go hard at her about it. Yeah, I'd like just... First of all, I don't think she would invite me on. I think she'd probably do her due diligence and like look up videos where I'm saying that she's a dumb fuck. Probably wouldn't appreciate